Victoria 3 is back with update 1.7 as well as the expansion pack, the Sphere of Influence DLC. In this video, I'm going to showcase some of the big changes and play through one of my favourite nations through its great game. Thanks to Paradox Interactive for sponsoring this video. You can check out Victoria 3 and the Sphere of Influence using my link down below. Let's roll. One of the massive additions is the Great Game, which you can see right at the start here on objectives. You can, of course, also participate using the normal sandbox, which is what I'm going to do, but you can jump in and get a quick look. Essentially, this is a power struggle between Russia and Great Britain, a kind of Cold War that's occasionally hot, if you will, and it centers around, you guessed it, it's Persia, baby, and the wider region. So that's who I'll be playing as today. The starting location certainly looks different from previous iterations of Victoria 3. Here we have Persia, and of course, Russia, the Great Bear, to our sort of northeast, and then we have British influence as well, seeping its way across to the west. Persia's Great Game entry begins with the eastern frontier, which points my direction towards some territory that we could liberate and resettle enslaved Persian communities if we so pleased. Here you can see it highlighted inside of the territories northeast of Persia, so it doesn't put me in direct conflict with what could be Afghanistan, nor with the Russian bear, but it does help me to sort of lean into not only the future chains of the Great Game, but also, of course, of expanding out to this kind of greater Persia. And there'll be many options that we can take along the way. I'm going to begin by trying to ram through National Guard by adding some militarism into our government, maybe get a little bit of a construction sector going on too, some of the basics to stock up what will be, of course, a very hungry and growing Persia. Handily here as the Persian start, I also have a subject now, and I don't know if you've been following, but the changes in and around update 1.7, as well as the Sphere of Influence, have really changed this dynamic and this relationship, adding some new options and abilities for us, with a focus around their liberty and their control. I could also choose to dive into the subject in particular. At the moment, wheat is something we're struggling with. Maybe I want to expand their wheat farms through the foreign investment mechanic. Hallelujah! This new visual overlay is kind of neat here as well. Who doesn't love a bunch of arrows flowing across their screen? I mean that literally, by the way. That's not even sarcasm. Oh, and actually, on the topic of goods, while I remember the building registry is kind of a good way to get a massive overview of this kind of stuff as well. I can sort by things that I've invested in abroad, for example, nothing as of yet, or that are located here, filtering by other levels, like is it privately owned, nationally owned, so on and so forth. The DLC, of course, like many other updates to the game, also adds many events, historical characters, so on and so forth. Sometimes they're free, sometimes it's DLC. Here you can see this is a Sphere of Influence event inside of the DLC in particular, and it's really focusing on what they're calling lobbies. In this case, the Anti-Russian League, supported by the intelligentsia. It opposes Russia, and it's from Persia. So I could push a certain group to join the Anti-Russian League. The diplomacy screens and stuff have really come quite some way. I like this a lot. It's really nice to be able to visualize the undecided parties, where their favor lies, like exactly how much it is, their strength, and who they're likely to favor. In this case, looks all right. Forced diplomatic play. They will immediately trigger a diplomatic play which may escalate into war. Adding a little bit of infamy my way. I think about halfway through here I'll stack on the next demand. We of course want this entire place, not just a small part of it. I mean, come on, give me some credit. It's also probably time to start rallying the troops. I've got this guy who's a little bit of a mountaineer, so that should give us some benefit. Anyway, less gas bagging, more probably not raising conscripts, but definitely sending in the armies. And there it is, war doth be declared. 14 versus 40 and 5, of course, my subject coming into fight. Could have chosen to disable that and let them off the hook, but obviously I'm not going to do that. This should be a fairly easy win despite the rough terrain and terrible conditions for my dudes, so don't mind speeding it up just a little bit. We should have better supply, at least initially. And like I say, even though we don't have great tech, look, we've got the cotton gin. We're a little bit behind some of the greater powers in this great game, but I think it's still one worth playing. Kind of fun. Oh yeah, there we go. Just absolutely ripped across it. Goodness, I accidentally left it on 5 speed for a little bit too long, and wham bam, thank you ma'am. The flag flies high. Very good. Shouldn't take long now to wrap this up. They're at -100. And just as I'm gas bagging my way through, there it goes. Gonna have to do a little bit of settling in the budget. Expenses are fairly high. We're still in the green though, and there's not really a great point in having too much cash lying around, so it shouldn't be the end of the world. There's also the introduction of power blocks inside of the Sphere of Influence DLC. Now, of course, if I'd selected a different player, like Britain, Prussia, Russia, Austria, the Ottoman Empire, we might have started with one. I can choose, however, to form a power block, and even though it may not necessarily be the wisest thing, I think it's a bit of fun, and we should at least see how it looks. So, as I click through, firstly, we have some customization options. The emblem and colors, highly customizable, as well as the statue for a little bit of fun. I went with, after some customization, this little number for our emblems and colors, and a big sun with a top hat. Very good. For our statue. Looks good to me. The important part in terms of the mechanics of the game, though, probably lie in the identity pillar and the principles. Inside of the identity pillar, I have a few different options here, from a trade league through to ideological unions, military treaties, perhaps, with progress per great power, major power mandated across the board, as well as different block members and leaders, different groups within society seeing benefits. Training rate out of the military might be a nice one. Enactment time for the ideological union. And these also shape the kinds of policies or principal groups, if you will. These will act as pillars to identify and also add to the cohesion of a group. You don't want to make a big group with a whole lot of different people who don't align on these things, otherwise it won't have the cohesion that it needs to survive. Inside of trade here, you can see we could opt for internal or alternatively external, reducing trade route bureaucracy, for example. Unfortunately for me, though, all of this will have to wait, for you must be more powerful, more recognized than I am. As an unrecognized regional power, it's simply not enough. As well as needing 500 influence, fairly easy to pull together. As you can see by hovering over down here, I also need the rank of major power before I can start to just create this. Otherwise, of course, we might potentially end up in a world where everybody is their own power block. Makes a lot of sense. For some playthroughs, it may have to wait in the wings for quite a while. It may not even ever get off the ground. But if you're playing as a major power or you're looking to rank up, you should be able to get this across the line. And the good news is that taking over the state of Herat has granted this action, claim the greater region. It will send an event that Britain may choose to accept, angering them somewhat. As you can see, the event Persia occupies Herat. But nonetheless, this is the progression of the great game. Oh, and here's a little bit more for you. What have they got to say for themselves? Great Britain will display heightened levels of aggression towards us, as we've rejected British demands, increasing their armed forces as well as other groups' approval, or alternatively, we can back down, yielding to their demand, reducing the interest group approval of those three groups. To get a bit of feel for the power blocks, it might be useful to quickly take a look at what the English perspective looks like. Here, there's slightly more developed. As you can see, they've got colonial offices too online, reducing the bureaucracy costs for colonial affairs, as well as the institution size change speed for them too. So there's a clear focus here, as well as vassalization increasing authority per subject. The game plan of this sovereign empire, fairly straightforward. And you can see a really nice looking, obviously kind of, Crusader Kings-esque, that broader engine inspired 3D character model standing here looking wonderful as well. The zoomed out view is pretty neat too, and again has quite a sort of Crusader Kings 3-esque, among, of course, many other games, vibe to it for me. You can see the British Empire here, as well as the rivaling ones all the way across. And if we zoom in even further, you can get a sense for the leverage level, the advantage, the likelihood that people will be swayed and influenced and perhaps ultimately become a part of this power block. And you can see it represented across the board. Who has the most leverage? The block leader gets to add new mandates over time. Here you can see the British one now ready. The fourth one, the fourth principle, won't be ready for another 3 years though, so I should use my one and only mandate here very wisely. These little dudes really are right in the way of my great game, my Persian great game back to it, and they probably need to get out of the way. So we're going to do a return state dealio and push it. they will not accept. There is a 0% chance. Fine, so be it. As predicted, approval, disapproval, well not predicted but literally shown, is fairly well balanced, or at least people tend to dislike the pair of us, not really interested in joining either side of this, and as you can see, wham bam, thank you ma'am, at an aggressive speed, we're through with the war. Obviously, these parts of the Great Game expansion are relatively straightforward for Persia, so long as we can keep Russia and Great Britain out of our interests for a little while and keep them occupied in their own territories, we might just be able to expand out and at least form some sort of Greater Persia this video. And sweet capitulation was enforced. We didn't actually even have to lift up our guns. Just the threat of war was enough. Let's get some, of course, some violent suppression, emergency relief, road maintenance maybe, do a little bit of building. We'll see how we go. That's a nice little nubbin expansion, and crucially it gets me up to some key areas too for this great game. And one of the other options is available here as part of the Great Game too. Speaking of, inside of this, the Eastern Frontier, we now have the request Russian military action. The same thing can be done with the Brits. You need to have a reasonable standing in terms of your relationship. Relations are greater than or equal to 50. We kind of requested it recently. What does it do? Well, as you can see, it'll increase our kill rate through the Persian Cossack Bridge. That's a permanent buff. We'll also, for 5 years, get an increase to offense and technology spread, and in exchange, you might recognize this name, their bloc will get extra leverage over us. You might remember, of course, I couldn't create a bloc, and Russia is indeed the leader of one. So it's a little bit of a trade-off. Do you want to maybe lose the Great Game, lose your influence, in exchange for some pretty sweet benefits? In this case, I'm keen to experiment, so I think I'm probably going to jump back in here and accept this gracious offer. Or at least, I should say, request this offer, which I'm sure they will accept. Indeed, Russia has immediately accepted our request for a military mission. Okay. A little bit of a trade-off with the devil there, but it will help me out because, of course, this hungry hippo needs to keep expanding, and I think that means it's probably going to be these guys next. Oh, but colonization has been unlocked, and slowly but surely catching up. Let's get academia. That will, of course, help the boost. That will allow me to potentially actually move in and colonize Turkmenia instead of going through a normal way. I notice mention of it as well inside of, what am I looking for here? The journal entries too. Jumping back into the Eastern Frontier, there is this Turkmen's mission as well, which actively leans into that colonization, so long as I can meet some of the requirements, mainly barracks, level 10, inside of Herat. Kabul, here they really don't like me. In fact, you could say they were antagonistic, -125. Let's see if they want to become a tributary, shall we? Come on, become part of Persia. Most people hate us equally. Little bit of changing favour, but it looks okay. Let's force that diplomatic play, stretch out up against the Sikh Empire, become wide Persia, as well as, of course, working on colonizing and growing north too. Okay, baby, it's wartime. War with Kabul has broken out. Actually, a little bit closer now that the two of these guys have decided to team up with one another. And of course, I've got a myriad of goals now, returning a whole load of states, as well as turning Kabuli into a tributary. Very good. It'll be harder than before, but initial indications look like we should be okay. We're in pursuit. They're in a panicked retreat. Always good to see. And of course, these days in Victoria 3, we have many more visualizations of what's actually going on, as well as lots of visualizations of all of the goods that I am horrifically short of. Boom, and a swing, big push down the bottom led to capitulation from one side. The rest should now be fairly easy to mop up. We're going to need to head into Bukhara, so let's set... Oh no, my mistake, apologies. Further into Kabul. All right, beeline that way, you absolute madmen. You glorious madmen. Obviously, support still on my side. Now, well and truly overwhelming them in every sense of the word. This is going to be a nice little take. Also starting to get some convoys online, and my power ranking is almost as high as it could be. And wham bam. Thank you, ma'am. There's the capitulation that we wanted. You can see little Kabuli actually accidentally acting as a really nice border state between me and what could be British expansion into this area. So I'm really not that mad at that. And would you look at this? I've just completed a lobby demand for the Ottomans. Well, actually, I embargoed the Ottomans. And now we have Pacify the Turkmens unlocked. That's because I got to work on building some barracks inside of Persia. And we've researched colonization. Meeting it. Let's do it. Unlocking, of course, another Sphere of Influence DLC, mind you, special event. Another little territory that I need is this little wee one here, Kunduz. My wary neighbor. Oh, and there's an Ottoman aristocratic revolt happening on our border there too. We'll just ignore that and opt for this return state play. Instead, there will be, of course, a very small enemy side. We'll force it on them. I don't want to pay any money. As I was saying, stretching across this way, then we just need to continue with the colonization here, which we are doing. Tensions are very high, but it's fairly successful. And finally sweep these last territories as well up to Khiva. And then we'll have what is a fairly well-considered, well-established Persia, and actually fulfilling the requirements of this great game task that I'm trying to complete too. And oh my goodness, look at this beautiful map with a little bit of conflict going on. Yikes, a little bit of Ottoman, Egyptian kind of back and forth here. In fact, Tripolitania, I should say. Either way, we'll leave them to that. We have, of course, picked up southern Turkestan, and now I'm kind of on the home straight. Now, my thinking here was, Russia takes a while to industrialize. It may be busy in the Caucasus with peace treaties and whatnot, trying to get around those, as well as, of course, fighting in and around the Ottoman Empire. Britain, well, they're always busy and they're always a powerhouse, so we'll take our chances. I see stretching across Oman, the Trucial States. A little bit messy, but I feel like jumping on this early is the way to do it. However, I would say that because I'm aggressive. If I was invading Russia, I'd be like, just go in during the winter, despite it never working for anybody. So maybe take what I'm saying with a grain of salt here. I also have a little bit of a civil war here, with economics laws actually largely being the focus. And the Turkmen have just initiated a diplomatic play against me. They're tired of being colonized. What is the play? Okay. They want to conquer the areas that I've taken. And I want colonization rights. And to war we go, barely mobilizing my troops. Just one army will, of course, be enough. And I'm happy to play through this one on 5 speed. Because I'm not sure entirely what they were thinking. Really unsure about that. Radicalism is becoming a little bit of an issue, and some of these events are giving me literally no option, but at least we can get some more loyalists out of that one, so I'll take it. The demand for laissez-faire economics ticks onwards and upwards. It could be worth reforming the government a little bit, or perhaps focusing in on a different law to strip back some powers. It's a difficult balance to make, and I'm still relatively early in the game. And Persian colonization rights have been restored. And the growth continues. With our long-standing truce no longer active, it's time to conquer the state. Again, quick check-in, everything looks fine. Let's force that one so it is indeed forced into a war. Kick the play button again and add some additional goals. We'll want that state returned. And very successfully, nobody interested in the conflict. They're too busy fighting their own fights. My some 48 dudes should obviously do pretty well against theirs. We'll just quickly check into the fight just to make sure. Should be victory upon victory. Yeah, look at that. It's just depleted. It's happening so fast, you can't even tell. And just like that, it is done. Wonderful. What's not so wonderful is our progression in terms of the laws. Indeed, fighting the great game and expansion comes at a cost, and this is the cost for me. And little Khiva here, as we unlock some currency standards. You are looking very tasty. Oh my goodness. The Khanate's just appeared. Okay, we'll ignore that. As I was saying, Khiva, looking very tasty. As you can see, there's some returned states to be forced, as well as some conquered states. I'll go for the returned one. We may as well strike while the iron's hot, as Turkmenia continues to be colonized. This will take no time at all. And the expansion, the great game of Persia, may very well be completing at least this massive stage. At least with the Russians occupied, hey, there's line infantry in their own sort of mess going on up there. We should be all right to push through. They clearly don't particularly like me, but then again, nobody really likes either side in this fight. And what I'm hoping will be the last fight to secure these borders. The Kazakh Khanate has declared me as their rival. Come on, Kazakh Khanate. Don't you have enough going on right now? I mean, seriously. The other thing for me to consider here is the growing threat in the east, and I don't mean the British, who have seemingly started the British Raj, and they're sort of making their way around and through. It's these guys. I don't want them to unite and become too strong. We've already taken out Kabul, so it should be okay. But, you know, return state play exists. They might even just accept it. So I might as well throw that out at them. Add a few of these extra states as primary war goals. Ooh, Bampur. Yeah, I'll take that too. Don't mind if I do. A fairly scattered, large, and unorganized front, as you can see, zooming right the way out at this level. I think the strategic objective should again be to try and pierce through the middle of them. We're fighting a few different people, obviously, as you can see, it's stretching across Makran, but generally, my strength is pretty good. We've managed to, hopefully, divide and conquer this foe. Did somebody say capitulation? Oh, yes, they did. Good. Holy moly! Yeah. Oh, that made us look a lot bigger than I expected. Really broke up those states. They're now well and truly pushed back. A little bit of annoyance around the edges here, a little bit of trucial states in Oman, but I haven't seen Persia looking so good. I thought going into this that it would be really hard, and I think that I've got a little bit lucky with navigating around these massive giant players in my sphere, but having this area so divided at least kind of makes it a little bit more doable from the Persian perspective. And you know what, while we're at it, I'm looking at you, cockhand. Yeah, that's all fine. Okay. Mopping up the remainder of these territories will be a little bit tricky. Here you can see I'm going to need to go at cockhand again after many years have passed. And there'll be a couple more minor territories. In this case, it's Fergana. I don't need the rest. I don't need this one. But I do need Fergana. And those little things, I don't know about you, but I find they tend to take quite a bit of time. And that's exactly what you can see playing out here. Another war for a minor territory, conquering Fergana, and I decided to take a little bit extra as well, because, I mean, if you're investing that much time, you might as well stretch out a bit more, right? What? Great Britain led the power block and is replaced with fascist Great Britain. Goodness. I do like to take a look at the world, and as I move toward the end of this video, I'd invite you to take a look at this world. We have the German Empire fighting with Russia, Persia at its absolute greatest. Just look at this big, chonky bad boy. Can we put our hands together? Thank you, Persia. Equally, some other interesting things have happened. Like, here's China and the Heavenly Kingdom next door, as well as Uzbekistan. And the world at large is quite an interesting place as well, as I have the police back down. Brazil, fairly small, some neighbors, fairly large. Much like Persia, where we ended up fairly large. Thank you for joining me today in this playthrough, taking a look at the 1.7 as well as Sphere of Influence updates, which you can, as a friendly reminder, check out using my link below. Thank you again for watching. I'll see you next time.